Sorry to break up all the fun, but hopefully we'll continue to have some fun and good conversations together. Anyone else that's still out there, you guys come on in.
Come on in.
I have to say that I'm grateful to be here, but to say that probably rings a little bit more true than it normally would when I speak in front of a group, because I would say after the past 3 days of riding on a motorbike in your streets, I'm grateful to be alive. I feel there's about 42 times I could have died over the past 3 days. You guys are pretty wild out there. Back where I'm from, I'm a pretty fast driver, and I'm usually ahead. I'm usually the one that's kind of moving, and not here, taking my time. I'm okay, and I'm alive, and I'm standing here, and I get to go back home and see my family, so I feel okay about it. It was kind of a little bit of a shot to my masculinity a little bit, to kind of sit back and let these guys all take off without me. But I am truly grateful to be here and learned a lot. It's my first time in Vietnam, first time in an Asian country. I've spent time in the Middle East, but have not been in Asia, so have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being in your coffee shop. I've enjoyed getting to meet many of you that are already in this room, so it's special. You have a special culture here. You're a special group of people, and I'm so honored and grateful to be able to stand in front of you today. And coming on the backside of what Jonathan shared, I don't speak a ton of languages and haven't been on a farm and haven't been to a bunch of different places. I do speak 2 languages, speak English, and I speak a little Southern if I need to. For some of you that might get that, that's the southern part of the U.S. That's where I'm from, and I can speak that if I need to. It's just a little bit of a draw. There you go. I got one. I got 2. But, hey, just kind of diving in here with where we're going tonight. Do me a favor. Take notes. Lean in. Get towards the edge of your seat maybe a little bit. Get ready to write and respond to what God's saying. There's a reason we have these journals for you, and that's for you to process, for you to listen, for you to take not just what we're saying, but what God hopefully is saying through us, that we're being a conduit and a channel for God to speak to you so that your life looks different tomorrow. Because I think if you walk out of here tonight and you go about your day and your work and your thought process and the way that you think about your work and your identity and your purpose, but maybe nothing changes, well, then maybe we didn't use this time as well as we could have. Because I think what we're talking about tonight, if we can grasp a hold of this, your identity as an image bearer, your purpose, your role, your shape. We're also going to talk about your community and your place. If we get this and understand it and practice it, it can change everything. Absolutely everything. Anybody with me on that? Anybody ready to be a little different tomorrow than you were today when you woke up? Cool. What Jonathan talked about was identity and purpose. Those things are a little fixed, I would say, in a good way, right? You can't run away from your identity and your purpose. It is who God's made you to be. You may lose it. You may lose track of it, as many of us in this room may have done over time. I'll share my story where I have for sure. But I think what we're going to talk about when we talk about shape is we're going to talk about where we have freedom to step into all that God has made us for and uniquely given us these lanes to run in. And so, 3 things we're going to talk about when we talk about your role and your shape. 1 is how God has shaped you. 2, the place where you're located, where God's placed you. And we'll close the night talking about the community you have and the community you build. So let me start by telling you a story. It's my story. It's a story of a lack of identity, a lack of purpose, a lack of community, of place, of understanding my shape. The story of my life until the age of 30 was this deep need for acceptance, this fear of rejection, this search for my identity, this lack of faith and understanding my purpose, and it caused me to make some of the worst decisions that you could ever imagine. 16 years of my life I lost to drugs and alcohol. I've overdosed on countless drugs, heroin, cocaine. I've spent 17 different times in jail. All of my teenage and 20s, I spent in and out of jail and on probation. I train wrecked all of the relationships I came into contact with, and I really made a mess out of my life. I was far from Jesus, far from faith, far from my identity, my purpose, my shape that we'll soon talk about. But all of that radically changed. On one day, I walked into a Christian food pantry. I walked in that day for two reasons. One, to get food because I was homeless. I was going from place to place to place, so I needed food. But two, I walked in because I wanted to point my finger at other people and say, now they need help. I've got it under control, right? Very, very twisted, very selfish. But I wanted to point at other people so I could feel better about myself, knowing that there are other people that were maybe worse off than I was, that were as depressed as I was, were as upset as where they were in life. Well, I walked in, and yes, I got food, so I checked that box. But when I started to look at the people that were there so that I could maybe feel better about myself, I was punched in the gut. I realized I was so wrong, because many of these people had been coming to this Christian food pantry for so long that they had this faith in Jesus, the same Jesus I had heard about from my parents. They had this joy about them. They loved life. They were loving me. They welcomed me. I can't remember the last time that I had been seen and loved and welcomed, because I was very much more of the least and the lost and the addicted and the depressed. But it was in these moments when I started to see that I was being seen and I was being loved and cared for. And then there were people that were running this food pantry that were loving on all of us, that were serving everyone, that were praying over everyone. And it was just such this like selfless scene that really, really struck me. And I loved it. I could only describe it as I felt good. It felt good to be there. So I went home with my bag of food. I went to my friend's couch and told people about it. And they were like, you went to a food pantry, and why was that impactful? Like, it didn't really seem to make sense. But I kept coming back, and I kept coming back. And the people that were running the food pantry, they were asking me to, why don't you stay a little later and help us clean up? Or why don't you come a little earlier and help us make bags? Essentially, they were just discipling me. They were asking me to lean in to help. And what was happening in these weeks after weeks after weeks of being involved is I started to find I had a purpose. I was starting to understand I had a role to play. I was serving other people. I was putting a smile on other people's face. I was able to help others. I was able to do what had been done to me just a couple weeks before. And this went on week after week after week. And what happened is God was just taking down these walls that I'd built around my life, where my life was completely about me. We talked about identity, image bearer. My image was myself. It wasn't an image of God. It was an image of self. My purpose was a purpose of self. It wasn't a purpose for God. But I was learning my identity. I'd had an identity crisis my whole life. I was adopted at the age of 2 months. And I was searching for this deep sense of acceptance and struggling so much with rejection. But over the course of these weeks, I was finding out who I was, my shape, which we're about to talk about. My place was being clarified. My community was starting to build around me. And in a radical moment in 2009, at the age of 30, I went from spiritual death to spiritual life. I literally was on the ground, face down with needles and prostitutes over Christmas. It was a terrible, terrible scene. But it was in that moment when God shook my body off the floor, out of an overdose, and said, son, you need to go home. And I went home. And it took me a couple days to get home, but my parents were there with welcoming arms. They brought me in. I couldn't believe it. It was 2 days after Christmas. There were still Christmas presents underneath the tree with my name on them. from my parents. They hadn't given up. I hadn't seen them in I don't even know how long. And they were there to welcome me. And it set me off on this course of just chasing after Jesus, to find my true identity, to understand that I was an image bearer, to understand that I had a purpose, I had a shape, I had personality, I had experiences that God could use for his kingdom work. And that's my story. And your story may be a version of that. But I think all of us at the end of the day could say that we all want to understand our identity so that we know our purpose. And so let's talk today about how shape, how place, and how community helps round out this circle of who we are and how God is using us to impact the world around us. Let's talk about shape. Let's talk about shape. We're going to define it really quickly. So there's 5 letters in shape, and they all mean something. See what we're doing here? Got a little acronym going. So the S is your spiritual giftings, right? These are the ways that you serve, encourage, equip other Jesus followers. H is your heart's passions. What makes your heart ache and feel great delight or even some deep sorrow. A is your abilities. These are your natural skills and your talents that God's given you. P is your personality, how you're wired to engage with others in the world around you. And E are those special experiences that have completely shaped your past and will help shape your future. And so together, this is your shape. You are uniquely crafted by the King and the Creator of the universe. Can we just stop for a second and take that in? Can we just take a deep breath? Understanding that the King of the universe, who created everything, created you. And he gave you a shape. He gave you the S, the H, the A, the P, and the E. And you're not here by accident. In fact, I don't even think you're in this room by accident. You're in this room in the very seat that you're in, as I was praying earlier, that God would help awaken you to your shape so that you can do amazing things through your work to impact the kingdom and the people around you. So, what is your shape? Think about that. What is your shape? This is something you're going to continue to think about as the days go on. So whether you're a manager or a student, an accountant or an artist, an office worker or a factory worker, God has shaped you to reflect the kingdom in only the way that you can. So be the best, whatever it is you do, worker in the city. It doesn't matter if you make shoelaces or chairs or TVs, or you run a shop, a cafe, or you're a leader of a whole organization. Be the best worker in Hanoi. That's how you impact the kingdom. When people look around them and they think about who is it that's influencing, impacting my life, they're going to look at how excellent you are as a worker. And they're going to hold that up against the reflection of everything that you say as a Jesus follower. Because if you have a great message as a Jesus follower, but you don't have a great work ethic or you don't have excellence in what you bring to the world, that's a half-hearted gospel, wouldn't you say? So let's connect shape into Scripture and into the story of Jesus and into your life. Why? Because there's a heartbreaking reality in the world today. And that is that there are 3.2 billion people around the world that will live and die and never hear the gospel in their own language. In fact, 60,000 people are added to that number every day. 60,000 people are added to that number every day, and I'm not okay with it. And hopefully if you're in this room today, you're not okay with it either. Because that's 3.2 billion people that need to know that they are an image bearer of the holy God, that they have a purpose to be able to make a kingdom impact, an assignment from Jesus, and they have a shape that has created them to do something that is extraordinary in the world around them. That's 3.2 billion people that we could see start to come closer and closer to their Savior, that may not have hope today, but we can bring them hope, that may not know that they have the opportunity to have relationship, to have reconciliation with the God of heaven. But we can help them understand that. So theologically and practically, let's connect shape for you and me. And let's go back to the creation story where we just were. You see what's interesting, one of the most fascinating aspects of the creation story is that God stops working after the sixth day. Isn't that interesting? Have you thought about that? As I was going over these notes, it was something that kind of took me back a little bit. I had to even be reminded that, wait, God stopped working. He stopped working. Think about that. He left creation in its most raw form on the seventh day as he rested. I mean, and there was a lot of work to do, wouldn't you say? I mean, we saw some of the pictures, very beautiful, but still a lot of work to do. I didn't see any structures. I didn't see life continuing to who knows what's in different types of flourishing. We had a long way to go. But what was his plan all along? It was for his image bearers to continue to do the work of shaping the world. You see, God could have continued to work after the seventh day because, as I said, there was so much work to do, but he rested and he gave us the empty canvas to be able to bring life and cultivation, as Jonathan said, into the world around us. See, there was water, but no irrigation channels. There was precious metals in the ground, but no machinery to extract it. Wood, but no houses or structure. There was sun and wind, but no means to store its energy. The picture of God's garden was that the world was meant to be in the way that it was started, but it wasn't meant to be left that way. We were supposed to get busy from the very beginning of creation in every corner of the earth, and that hasn't stopped. So how? You may say, Dana, you may ask, well, how do we do this? How do we step into this? Well, I think there's this beautiful diversity that we see in the garden and that we see in people and we can see in ourselves. So in the garden, there's this diversity in plants and animals, colors and sounds and scenery. And there's this diversity in humanity and soon even cultures as people spread around the world. And then we see this diversity in the people of God, don't we? Think about it. Just go back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 with me, just in your mind, even if you have to close your eyes and you see this beautiful diversity and you see these spectacular people that were created in unique ways to contribute to this beautiful but very unfinished kingdom picture. You see, God's design for his young, emerging kingdom project required the contributions of each lane of diverse work. Some may say vocation. Everyone had a role to play. That hasn't changed. It's still the same today. Each and every single one of you, as I look across and see your faces, you have a role to play. You see, kingdom doesn't happen without different types of work. And I know you've been in my shoes, I've been in your shoes, I've looked at other people and other jobs and thought, man, I wish I could do that job because that job has real impact. Or I wish I could do that role and be in that type of influence because, man, I could really do some great things. But I have to step back and say, no, God, you have placed me here exactly where I'm at for this moment, this season, this group of people, to be excellent in the work and the diverse work that I'm doing right here. For example, this happens every time. This type of work, this God shaping his people to shape his kingdom, happens in these examples. Think of an artist that takes a palette of colors, paints a landscape or a portrait, and does what? Awakens wonder, right? An artist does that. Think of a farmer that tills the soil, takes seeds, sows a crop, and does what? Sustains life. Think of the teacher that takes words, ideas, shapes, and educational lessons and cultivates growth. Think of the healthcare worker that takes research, medicine, and techniques and does what? They heal. Think of the mechanic that takes parts and engines and an engineer that takes parts and builds a laptop, and they both, as very well mentioned, they reveal possibilities and potentials. They all design our future. They bring life to death. But it's not just them that we're talking about today. It's you. You insert your role, your job, your career, your whatever it is that you want to put on it, your vocation, your calling. We all have that calling to be a part of the mission in God, no matter what it is that we do. And what we do may change, but for the season that it's in, what you're doing is God ordained for a purpose. So, how and where do we find out how we are uniquely shaped? I think to answer this, we have to go back before creation even took place. Paul explains in Ephesians that before time, God thought of us and designed us as a masterpiece. Amen. You're a masterpiece. Has anyone told you that before? I sure hope so. I hope God's telling you that right now. I hope your Father is telling you that you are a masterpiece. It says in Ephesians 2:10, for we are God's masterpiece. He's created us anew in Christ Jesus so that, there's a so that there, that we can do good things that he planned for us long ago. So as the great creator, God not only prepared work for you to do, but he designed and shaped you in such a way that you can actually do it. Not just be a part of it, but be excellent. And doesn't that just take the weight off you today, knowing that the creator of heaven and earth has tasked you with something and has given you everything you need to do as a masterpiece, that he'll help you do it? I don't know about you, but that gives me freedom to step into everything that I'm doing right now. And I'll close this part with just this last little thing that I call the last 5%. Think about this with me. 80% of everything that you do, I believe that anyone else could do. 80%. So nearly everything you do, someone else could probably step in your shoes and do it. That leaves 20%, right? My mathematicians out there. So out of the next 20%, I think maybe 15% of that someone else could do with training. Someone else could run your meeting. Someone else could do the code you're doing. Someone else could farm the way you're farming, could run your shop the way you do with some training. But that leaves what? 5%. I believe that last 5%, your last 5%, is what only you can do. You're the only human on earth that can bring that last 5% to the table. You're the only human on earth that God has assigned that last 5% to be the best cafe shop owner that you can be, to be the best factory worker that you can possibly be at your spot on the assembly line doing exactly what you do, to be the best possible engineer that designs something amazing and structurally sound that only you can do, that only you can do. I think it's that last 5% that you're responsible for, that you can't delegate to somebody else. That you alone are responsible for it. I think that last 5%, we're accountable to God for it because he gave it to us. That last 5%, I think, will dictate how joyful your marriage will be, will dictate how much influence you have in the world around you and in the generations after you. So what's your last 5%? What's your shape? What is it that you and only you can do because of the way God has created you? I'm going to throw up some questions on the screen, and I'd love to give you guys just a couple minutes to think about these, journal these, write these down, and then I'll be back up here for the next part. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, I know it's probably a lot to process. We got 2 more sections. These will go probably a little quicker, but thank you so much. I saw all of you taking notes and just really being in the moment, and I appreciate that. We all appreciate that, so thank you. Let's talk about place. Place. Place is where we use our shape to work and live in the everyday spaces of life. It's essentially our garden with the world around us. And this is all connecting back to what Jonathan so beautifully set up. Think about your garden, your area to cultivate. He used the example of bread, taking grain and stripping it down and processing it and coming up with this beautiful bread, right? There's so many things that you can articulate, I think, in your own work and what it is that you do and how you cultivate something out of nothing, maybe. But that's your garden. We all have our own garden within cities that's ultimately within the world, just like the garden was within Eden and Eden was in the world. You have your space and your place where God has positioned you. What I like to call it is it's your circle of influence. And it's a circle that moves with you as you move. So your circle of influence moves with you from home to work, to the market, to the restaurant. That is your place. Not just where you work, but your place continues to go with you. Yes, there's a focus on the marketplace and being able to impact and influence people in your marketplace that are on screen with you, that are next to you, to your left and to your right. But there's also people as you go to the gym and sit at a restaurant and strike up conversations with your server or with someone that you're working out next to or someone you're in line at the market with. That's your place. That's your circle of influence. The garden is the first place that God plants his people. This is where they started their job of cultivating his kingdom as we go back to the creation story. And even as Jonathan put up those pictures earlier, think about those pictures with me for a minute. Isn't it interesting, as you guys called it out, that everyone was just kind of hanging out, sitting down, enjoying creation. I didn't see anybody sweating. I didn't see anybody working. I didn't see anybody cultivating. Right? None of us go to work and, I don't know, but I don't think many of us go to work and we just hang out, do we? No, wouldn't that be a waste of all the talent that God's given you? Right? That's your place to cultivate. That's not your place to rest. Although, of course, we are healthy and we get rest into work, of course. But God wants you to cultivate something in your work no matter what it is that you do. Within all you can see as you think about the garden and your garden, all that's needed within that space is to bring fullness of life. It's all right there within your reach in the same way it was in the garden. And it's for God's people to steward their environment with care and growing wisdom. And yet, as amazing as all that is, God has called us to imagine a world bigger than just our garden. And the people of God in the beginning of time, he was calling them to imagine a world that was way bigger than just the garden. That the garden, yes, was a starting point, a genesis, if you will, for the potential good and order around them. But he also said, fill the earth and subdue it. Subdue means to bring control and order. So far beyond the boundaries of the garden and your garden, God calls his image bearers outward into the great expanse of their world, such as natures of God's creation. We see this ever expanding, this unleashing of God's power and glory through the touch and through the hands of his children. That's you and me. So as we go to the markets, where the Creator's love can be uncovered and unleashed through skills in the hands of a craft maker, or to the fields, where a dusty, parched landscape can yield a harvest, to the homes where the broken can be made whole and the lonely can have a place to belong. We go to the schools where imagination and hope take shape. There's a pastor turned politician who reminds us in this quote that says, "There's not a square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is Lord over all, does not exclaim, 'Mine,' but he says, 'It's yours. This is for your good and ultimately for my glory.'" So may our coming and going, our working, our investing, our laughter, our sorrow, our building people up, our celebrating in the high times and being with people in the low times, may that spring forth kingdom life in everyone, in every sphere of life. And I'll close with this part as we bring some clarity around the word of calling. I think as a society, as culture, we've so messed up this word calling. So we believe you don't have to wait for God's call. It's not something that you wait around and, man, sit down with my feet kicked up. I hope he calls me. I hope God calls me to do mission for him. Well, let me give you a heads up. If you're waiting for that call, I can assure you it's already come. That call has already been rung on your phone. God's called all of us to do his mission in every sphere of life. I mean, could you imagine, people back in the creation story, going back to Genesis 1 and 2, and people looking around and saying, "Well, I'm part-time. I'm part-time called. That person over there, I think they might be full-time called." Right? How weird would that be? We're all full-time called. Right? We're all part of God's mission. So remember that this idea that is being challenged in Genesis 1 is that only a select few have been chosen. That's not true. God's saying no way, an emphatic no. Throughout all of Scripture, he's saying that. This is what it means to be human, that we're all on mission together, you and me, to carry that purpose. No one's excluded and no one is excused. I'm going to throw some more questions up here. Answer these, journal these down, talk to them with a friend next to you, and I'll be back up in just a minute for our last session. Okay, community. We were designed to work in community. It's interesting, right? Community is hard, isn't it? Community's hard. Can I get some involvement? There you go. Thank you. It's hard, right? It can be messy. But man, the payoff from community, what community can do for our lives, for our health, for our identity and purpose, to be able to go together with other people on mission for God. It's a game changer. But the reality is, so many people go through life isolated and alone. I was a pastor on staff at a church in the U.S. called Passion City Church, part of the larger Passion movement, and I oversaw community for several years, among other things there. And it was amazing. We would do these surveys and hear back from people that would give us this feedback about how connected they were or not connected. And I maybe had a positive lens thinking, oh, most of our church is connected. Most everyone's in community. We had a very, very large church, 25,000 people or so. And it was amazing how many people, well over 2/3, were isolated, would say they didn't have community. We started digging into the statistics of that. And the reality is it wasn't just our church. It was nearly every church in North America, and a problem across the globe. People live in isolation. They don't go at life together. And that can be hard when we're reminding ourselves what our identity is, our place is, our shape is, our place is, but we're doing it all alone, right? But think about the largest moves of God in history. Some of the revivals that have happened, or some of the things that you see in Scripture where God did some of the most amazing things. They happened in vibrant community. They happened in groups of people that were on mission together. God is community. He has always existed in community in all of eternity. We see this in Genesis 1 in verse 27. God himself is community. He gives us the most perfect example of what community looks like. Before time, he existed in three unique persons, loving and being loved. You see, God creates community to take his kingdom forward. And it's out of this community that God creates. And it's because of this community that God says it's not good for there to only be one. I think of my kids. I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. And there's probably nothing sweeter for me at this point in my life than when I pick them up from school or daycare. And the first thing they say to me is, I made a friend today, Daddy. I made a friend. It isn't that I did great on my test. I do want to hear that. I got a great report on my behavior. Those are all good. But what really gets to my heart is when they talk about their friends and their community that they're building, because it's reminding me that they're engaging with other people, that they're in their own little way, in their own little ages, they're doing life together, and they're understanding the value of friendship and the value of doing life together. There's this beautiful story that I want to start to close with. It's this story of this Olympian, this British runner, Eric Liddell. And it's a beautiful example of how we bring together identity, purpose, shape, place, and community all within one story. He was an Olympic gold medalist in 1924, and the quote that he had that's very famous has been repeated many times over. You probably heard it. He said, God made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. She's going right there with me. She knows that I'll give you the, she's right there with me. I love it. There was a movie that came out called Chariots of Fire. It's an extremely popular movie based off his life and this story. And this was part of his identity. He was understanding that he was an image bearer of God in everything that he did, whether he was a runner or whatever else he chose to do with his life, which were many things that he went on to do. It said that all of his life was surrendered and employed for his king. He said, I believe God made me for a purpose, to be light in darkness everywhere I go. That was his purpose. Talked about his identity, his purpose. And part of his shape was that he had these talents and unique giftings. And Eric was on mission for Jesus, uniquely gifted with gold medal level talent. And for his place, he said, there's no difference, no tension between athletics and ministry, running and passion. It's all one thing, and it's everywhere I go. I mean, he's just going right down the list for us tonight. These are just his quotes. And then ultimately, part of his community and part of his purpose all came together as it ultimately landed him in China, where he continued to run and teach athletics, leading to this huge network of multiplying groups of these new, vibrant communities of Jesus followers all throughout the region of China. and his story goes down in the history books as one of the most amazing stories. If you don't know it, I suggest you know it, maybe even watch the movie. But, every time we do these good works, Ephesians 2 says that God prepared for us. The people around us experience this taste. They catch the scent. They feel the touch of God's kingdom coming through us down from heaven as a channel, as a conduit, right into their life. So you may ask, Dana, I don't have community. I don't have anywhere. I'm isolated. I'm part of that statistic. So where do I even start in building this community? So what I would say is you have the opportunity today to pull up a chair to the table of God, because he's sitting right there and he's inviting you to do community with him. The holy God, the King of the universe, the creator of everything, has a chair pulled out at his table, and he wants to commune with you. He desires to show you community like no other, a heavenly connection. And from this experience, you'll understand, you'll have an example of what community looks like. Community starts with a chair, at a table, a meal, a sensitivity to the moment while you turn down life and turn down the world and turn down your phone and turn down all the distractions, and you turn up this awakeness, this sensitivity to being in the moment with other people. Sitting at the feet of Jesus on the mountaintop, whatever phrase you like to put towards it, but being with the Lord in your own devotion time, that's community. So if you want to know what community looks like, you replicate that with other people. You break bread together. You pray together. You talk about God's word together. You sit around a table, and you not just act like family, but you step into family. You step into the highs and lows with the people around you. You have been given such a gift. I want you guys to know that today. If you hear nothing else from anything we say today as we close, you have been given a gift by God directly to you. You are an image bearer, having a purpose of the most unique shape in a God-assigned place with this deep connection to community. So go. Step into this life, this mission with confidence, knowing that Jesus, God Emmanuel, God with us, is with you. So there's a couple questions that are going to come up. And right after these questions, we're just going to give you just maybe about a minute or so to look through these, think about these. And then Jonathan is going to come up and we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. And I think Pastor's going to join us as well.
I said something.
All right. So just a quick little change of plans, just small. There happens to be a bunch of dessert that's still outside, and that's not going to be there much longer, so we don't want to keep that from you. And what we are going to do, though, is we're going to put a QR code up here on the screen, and we want you to engage with us. We definitely, if you could right now, just get your phone out. I see some people on it right now. Take a picture of that QR code. That's going to take you a link to a survey where you can let us know a little bit more about your journey, answer a few questions that will be helpful for us. While you have your phone out, I would love if you would also follow us on social media. Anybody on social media here? Yeah. 2 people. Awesome. Wow. I would have thought everybody would have raised their hand. No, I'm kidding. I know you got your phone in your hand. But it's at Scatter Global. We also have a website, scatterglobal.com. But we'd love for you to start following us on Scatter Global. We're going to constantly have content and take you on a journey of understanding more about what we're talking about and so much more, connect you to coaching and to jobs. And we have so much offer, so much services that you can step into as you think about what's next, where you're currently placed and what's next in your life. So we're going to be around up here for a little bit to have some conversations if you want to. But there's some food and dessert out there, right? Am I right, guys? Food and dessert out there. So go ahead and finish that off. Go back to some of those amazing conversations that you were having earlier. And thank you for your time tonight. We're grateful for you. Dive into that survey. Follow us on social media. And we love you. Have a good night. Bye, guys.